Welcome to this special bonus episode of Best Fails, the place where failure isn't feared, it's explored. So, if you're new here, Best Fails is a brave space where we unpack the stories we often hide. We look at what went wrong, what it revealed, and how it shaped us. Today's guest is Christine Sutton, an HCPC registered occupational psychologist who not only shares one of her own best fails, but also guides us into the complex experience of failure for women in the workplace. Together, we explore the systemic biases that shape women's leadership journeys, including the glass cliff phenomenon, where women are placed in high risk leadership roles during times of crisis. Christine shared how women can more often internalize blame and discuss the ways in which failure can quietly derail careers. She also reminds us of the critical need for psychological safety in our workplaces. This episode is a call to reimagine failure not as a personal flaw, but as a reflection of the flaws in the systems we move through. So let's get into it. Welcome, Christine, to the Best Bills podcast. It is an absolute pleasure to have you joining us this season.
No problem. Thanks so much for inviting me on to speak to you and that you're interested in hearing what I might have to say.
Oh, for sure. This is groundbreaking for the podcast in that you are coming on, yes, to share a best skills, but you're also going to be sharing your expertise as an occupational psychologist as we delve into women and failure within the workplace. So this is a bit of a first year trailblazer on the podcast.
No pressure.
No pressure at all, man. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to the audience so that they know a little bit about your professional background and
Okay.
so forth. But then we'll talk a little bit about who you are and get some details about your best skills
Mhm.
before we go into what the research says, what your experience has shown you as well. Christine is a HCPC registered occupational psychologist and chartered fellow of the CIPD with over 20 years experience working across multiple industries. She began her career in the financial services sector where she supported senior leaders across jurisdictions on employee development, leadership, and large-scale change initiatives. Since then, she has worked with organizations in diverse sectors to strengthen leadership capability, build effective teams, and support cultural transformations. She is accredited in a wide range of psychometric tools and uses these in recruitment, leadership development, coaching, and team effectiveness programs. Christine also delivers workshops and culture change initiatives, helping organizations to build trust, ownership, and accountability while aligning leadership behaviors with strategic goals. Her areas of interest include leadership development, organizational culture, and building high performance teams. She has a particular focus on how behaviors, culture, and diversity shape organizational effectiveness and draws on research to inform inclusive and sustainable approaches to leadership and team development. Wow, Christine. So many buzz points that I love there. Anything to do with leadership development, team effectiveness, high performing teams, those are things that I am so completely interested in. So I am
Mhm.
looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have today.
Okay, me too.
Yes. So we've heard a little bit about your background, about all the years of experience that you've had. Now we want to know a little bit about Christine, the person. So tell
hmm
us a little bit about yourself, how you grew up, your family, those types of things.
hmm Okay. Well, I suppose I was born in Belfast in Northern
Hmm.
Ireland,
Hmm.
and I suppose my early years I would have kind of had a bit of exposure to maybe I suppose what we kind of call the troubles.
Oh,
So
right. Yes.
yeah,
Hmm.
so that was my kind of my early years, but I was very much kind of I think shielded from that because
Yeah.
of my mother and father. They were
Yeah.
very adamant that that it not impact us,
Hmm.
moved us to the country, and certainly my father placed a very strong emphasis on education.
Yeah.
and learning. He himself left school very, very young. So I think he wanted us to be educated and, to be our best selves, really. Um, so yeah, so spent my early years in Belfast. And then I suppose, interestingly, I really got interested in psychology probably about the age of 16, just
Oh, wow.
understanding how people tick. And maybe it was just
Yeah.
because of what I'd experienced and things maybe I saw as a child that maybe other children wouldn't necessarily have seen.
Yeah.
Um, and and so I was just interested in that. So I was fortunate enough to be able to do an A level in psychology,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was kind of where it started. Went on to university to do applied psychology, um, and at that point in time, um, people were very much being pushed into the clinical side, and that
Okay, yeah.
wasn't necessarily for me. So
Yeah.
I went in and worked in the charity sector for a while, and then just got into the people sector and worked my way
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of almost full circle back to psychology, marrying the love of psychology and HR, and very much
Yes.
kind of um, came back to education a little bit later to do the masters and to complete my qualification in occupational
Yeah.
psychology. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I suppose now I'm actually, after kind of some stints in the US, the UK, the Isle of Man,
Yes.
and we returned to Ireland. So I'm now based in Cork, in the very
Yeah.
south of Ireland, and I suppose I live here with my husband and two, I suppose, teenage boys, and my little dog.
Yeah.
I love, so yeah, I'm keeping busy with life, with work, with everything that I suppose a
Lovely.
mother and a professional has to
Yes.
keep busy with.
Oh, as soon as you put mother and professional in there, we know the busyness that must be that must be occurring.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
and the kids have been great, actually, because when you've got kids and you're back in education as well,
Yeah.
I think, I suppose as parents we want to be role models to our kids.
Yes.
Especially, I have two boys.
Mm-hmm.
And for me it is very important that I bring them up understanding that everybody is equal regardless,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and for them to see me as an equal to my husband, um,
Yes.
and for them to see me continuing to learn in, I suppose,
Even as an
um,
adult.
yeah, as an adult.
Yeah.
I'm kind of saying
Yeah.
you never stop learning.
Yeah.
Nobody knows it all. So
Yes.
so they used to come and see me writing my essays
Oh,
and doing all
wow.
my coursework. How many words have you got now, mummy? So yeah, so I think that was very important for me because it reflects on I suppose the role models that I had from my parents, who were
Yeah.
very hardworking. And as I said, my father didn't get an opportunity to have a
Yeah.
proper education, so um, seeing his love of reading and learning and
Yeah.
knowledge, so really kind of rubbed off on me. So I want to pass the baton now to the next generation.
I understand that so fully. Actually, while you were talking, it made me think of my father. Similarly, he didn't he left school pretty early, but he got into the fire service, and every single course or training that they did, he made sure he did every single one.
Mhm.
And when they would have exams or whatever, he would come home and he'd be like, "Oh, I got 100%."
Oh.
Always did. And my father never got less than 100% at anything, and he was so proud of that. And I think that also rubbed off on myself and my brother as well, because both he and my mother pushed education really hard for us as well. But
Mhm.
seeing him as an adult striving and making sure that he was learning continually also definitely left the impression.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
this is the podcast about failure, so could you tell us about your first memory of a failure?
It was interesting. I was really kind of thinking about this and
Yes.
thinking about, as a child, and I think for me, what's interesting as a psychologist as well is those early memories and the things that
Yeah.
we link them to. and I suppose how it does impact us then in later years. And
Yeah.
one of the first, now I wasn't really young, I was probably about 10.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in Northern Ireland at that time, you had to sit what was called the 11 plus.
In
Um,
Barbados too, yo. Okay. Same.
so so
Yeah.
you had to sit the 11 plus, and I suppose I was in a, I suppose I moved schools a few times,
Sure.
as a, in primary school. And I suppose when I was, I suppose, studying for it, the
Mm-hmm.
principal, she was an amazing woman, absolutely
Mm-hmm.
amazing woman, and very much a role model for me as well. But she, I suppose, was full of confidence for me. She felt I would handle it really well, and that I should have no issue in passing it.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, results day, I think the whole street could hear me wailing, as I got, because back then it was just pass or fail, whereas now
Okay.
there's like, various
Different.
grades.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think the principal, she was shocked, um, and because I guess I'd been built up to expect, yeah,
A path that you'll pass.
yeah,
Yes.
and she, yeah, she was shocked. I think we were all shocked, didn't quite
Uh-huh.
know. My parents were just, I was devastated. I can just picture in my mind where I was sitting, and that I was wailing for quite some time.
Oh
Um,
man.
so that was something that, is so clear in my mind. That
Yeah.
kind of first feeling of I wasn't good enough to pass, and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
principal
Yeah.
kind of, she appealed, she looked into it and everything, and figured out that I actually was only a couple of marks off
Off of a
pass,
path.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's life. Um,
Yeah.
there's a cut off, and I didn't pass. And I think what was important for me, because I had a school in mind that I wanted to go to. It was a grammar school,
Yes.
and obviously you had to pass the 11 plus to get in.
Yes.
At that point in time, there was another route to get in, and I suppose my mum and dad thought long and hard, and the principal again reassured them that I was more than capable of the standard that
Yeah.
was required. So we,
Yeah.
we did it, went that route, and I suppose what that taught me is that, I suppose, that's one failure, and failure isn't
Yeah.
final. You know,
Yes. Yeah.
it's um it's a moment of, for me, it was a moment of growth. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
decided, right, I'm going to show them. So, as
Yes.
I went into school, um, yeah, I excelled, and
Yeah.
did really well, and was very much on par. And they said absolutely there was no issues, and yeah, that
Well,
was. I suppose for me it was just, you bounce back,
yeah.
you use that, um, as as an opportunity to learn, and as an
Yeah.
opportunity to, okay, I'm going to show them. And that's almost kind
Yes.
of like how I responded to that,
Hmm.
to kind of maybe feedback I've gotten as well, is that, right, I'm going to show
Yes.
them. So maybe that's the Northern Irish in me.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man, it is so interesting how, and I guess because it is life and school is one of the first major experiences that we have in our lives, how so many of the guests that we've had on the podcast have spoken about their first failure being associated with school, and that
Mhm.
whole feeling of recognizing for whatever particular situation it is, not measuring up, or not having that feeling of not
Yeah.
being good enough for whatever particular thing it is. So that seems to be a quite common experience that people have. So I know for you, you've talked about the fact that it left you with that feeling of, I'm going to show them that I am better than this. I can do better. I can succeed. Did it leave you maybe with even a sense of, oh, does this mean that I haven't measured up before you go into I'm going to show them?
Um, I don't, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just taught me, and I've been described about as this a number of during a number of periods during my career as being persistent. Whether or not that
Yes.
is
Yeah.
positive or negative feedback, I don't know, because I think the two people that said it were both male leaders. You're very persistent.
Mm.
Um, so I think I think that's what it taught me. And it's funny, I'd never failed an exam since,
Right.
except once at university, and
Yes.
I had to retake it. And the next time I
Yeah.
retook it, I it literally was like the
Ace that.
tendency. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I was like, oops. Sometimes we need those little things to give you that kick, or that
Yes.
kind of don't rest on your laurels.
Yes.
Don't take things for granted.
Yeah.
Um, and I wouldn't be the most academic. I certainly wouldn't be like, top student or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have to kind of work at it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've done that throughout my
Yeah.
throughout my career, and just people kind of telling you that, oh, you're not smart enough, you're not going to get the
Mm.
grades that you want in order to have that career. Again, it's kind of like that little voice inside me that says, I'll show you.
I'm gonna show you. I love that, and I love the lesson of persistence. It's interesting because one of the other guests, she had a similar situation with her 11 plus as well, and she had to resit it. But she said the thing that it taught her was that you have to work for success and you have to work for the outcomes you want. It does not just fall into your lap like that. You've got to
Yeah.
work for it. So I love the lessons of persistence that I am hearing coming through. So we are going to get now into the opportunity for you to share your best fill story. What this best fill is like. Tell us a bit about the context. What was going on? What is your best fill?
Okay, so I suppose the great thing and what I love most about my job is that I get to work with lots of different people in lots of different industries, um, in lots of different ways. So I feel very privileged to be trusted with that,
Hmm.
and quite often, I'm dealing with senior leadership teams, um, and one thing again, I was thinking kind of about various things that have maybe gone wrong, or things that haven't quite worked out as planned. But I suppose one from a professional aspect is that I suppose I was working with uh, I suppose a senior leadership team, and I wanted to establish a baseline. I think from my perspective, and as a psychologist, you kind of want to get an indication, or a
Yeah,
measure as to, right,
yeah.
rather than dealing with anecdotes and things like
Hmm.
that. So as well as observing and sitting in on some of their meetings and having regular conversations with them, I wanted a baseline about the team's working environment. And one of the tools, I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with it, is the HSE management standards tool.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I really like it. It's the team, I explained it to the team, they understood, and I felt it would provide quite valuable insights into I suppose their working environment, any potential stressors, and their general well-being.
Yeah.
Um, and I suppose the challenge that I then faced was post survey, when I presented the results. Something I suppose a little unexpected occurred, and
Uh-huh.
it transpired that, and this was a small enough group.
Sure.
Some of the team members reported feeling bullied, and that was like, I suppose it was just silence. The senior management, like, they reacted really negatively,
Right.
and I suppose I viewed it as an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to address the concerns and to be able to move
Yeah.
forward in a really positive way, whereas they became really defensive, um,
Ah,
and said we must have oversight on everything going forward. So that felt like a real failure for me, because it was a
yeah.
failure in understanding. It was a failure
Mm-hmm.
for me in terms of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I hadn't anticipated. I didn't kind of think about the reaction and how
Mm.
the findings and the data would field to leadership.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hadn't framed it in a way to help them respond more constructively.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
what I saw as an opportunity for development, it's like you see a result in a survey or in a piece of data where you see an opportunity to improve. They saw it as a reputational risk.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that um, that really hit me quite hard. And it took me quite some time almost to kind of write, okay, not to fix it, but I suppose to learn from it, because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't deliver the impact that I wanted to deliver.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
I think as someone that loves data, I
Yes.
like to have information. I like to kind of when a client kind of comes to you and says, right, this is the problem, and I always kind of almost want to figure it, right, well,
Is this the problem?
let's figure out if this is actually the problem. And that was
Yes.
what I was kind of doing with this client, because again, they were kind of saying, oh, this is the problem, and I'm like, is it really? um
Yeah.
so but the data doesn't always speak for itself.
Yeah.
So that's what's really important. I had to learn to frame and prepare the ground,
Mm-hmm.
because often when we're kind of relaying feedback back, when we are, I suppose, giving them that information, we need to ensure that that information and that data doesn't create resistance,
Yes.
that it
Yeah.
creates, I suppose, um, a need or an understanding that there's an opportunity here to change how we do things, to
Yeah.
improve our team's well-being, that will ultimately impact their bottom line, their
Yeah.
project, their, the way they work together as a team. So that was really a massive learning for me, and I had
Yeah.
to take it as a learning, and had to take it that um, not everybody sees, and this is the whole point as well about individual differences, is that not everybody will see it in the same way as I see it. So I'm like, but the data says,
Yes.
this, but you're dealing with human beings, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really have to expect the unexpected when you're
Yeah.
kind of delivering some of that information. And I suppose I've really, really learned from that, um,
Mm-hmm.
that the framing, the context, understanding that group of individuals is really important. You want to make sure that it's constructive and not destructive with the group that
Yes.
you're working for. And I've
Yeah.
really learned, I've worked with groups where the feedback has been so much worse. And again, it's about how you frame it
Yeah.
and how you present it back, trying to make sure that um, that you're maybe removing some of the emotion in it as well, especially where there's
Yes.
qualitative data being collected. Obviously,
Yes.
this one, there was no qualitative data, it was just
The
numbers.
numbers.
But where
Yeah.
people are giving their experiences, it can sometimes be quite emotive. So
Yes.
I've had to learn that sometimes it's good to leave the emotion in, dependent on what I know and how the relationship that I've developed with
Yeah.
that group. And sometimes you need to remove that in order for it not to be um
Blown out
seen
of
as
proportion.
destructive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that for me was massive. So it was just frame your data carefully,
Yes.
um and try to kind of see it through their eyes.
Yeah.
Try and
Yeah.
and be that little bit more empathetic about, they could feel really exposed here. So,
Yes. Yeah.
and that, no, that was it was quite some time ago. And I've since worked with members of that group again. They've trusted me to
Oh,
obviously to
lovely.
continue to kind of work with them.
Yeah.
And I did work with that group again, and we really
Yeah.
kind of worked on that, primarily because it did expose a need for psychological safety. And for me,
Yes.
that was the foundation, is that if, and maybe that's where I should have started, was building that psychological safety to say
Safety. Yeah.
people learn, people innovate, and and people can speak out when
Yeah.
it's safe to surface kind of difficult
Yes.
truths. And
Yes.
that's what
Yes.
we were doing there. And that really led me to kind of delve much more deeply into Amy Edmondson's work around
Yes.
psychological safety,
Safety. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and where teams have more psychological safety, they learn, they perform better,
Yes.
particularly after failures.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and I suppose that I think shaped my approach, in that I start there. I start kind of making sure that I'm creating a safe environment going forward for, open and perhaps sometimes difficult conversations,
Conversations. Yeah.
because a lot of the time I'm working with organizations where there are difficult behaviors, there are difficult
Mm-hmm.
relationships within teams. Um, so it's not all kind of easy breezy, lovely work. Quite often it is
Yeah.
raw conversations.
Tunes.
So
Yeah.
that made me reflect on my approach and kind of saying, right,
Yeah.
when I do this again, what am I going to do differently?
Do
And I think
differently.
that's one of the biggest things we need to learn from when things don't go to plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's one experience of there's been a few.
I mean, I think as the years go by, the failures definitely will pile up because we don't operate in perfection. But one of the things that you said as you were talking, the thing that really stood out to me, especially when you were talking about framing it and even starting with psychological safety, is like doing it in that way, framing it. Starting from that space, models it for the leaders. They've had the experience of having difficult conversations in a safe environment, so they see how it feels, they see how it works, so that when it is opened up to feedback from the from their team members, etc., it isn't as scary now because they've had their moment, they've had their time with it as well.
Yeah, yeah. One
Yeah.
of the things that I now kind of do with groups, and again, it's based off of Amy Edmondson's work.
So
Obviously,
yeah.
psychological safety is something that you can measure, and you can do that as
Yes.
well within
Yeah.
groups. And again, I've gotten groups to do that, and it's a starting point. But
Yeah.
there's this brilliant, and I'm sure there's lots of different words for it, but I call it the
Yeah.
fear conversation. So it's almost like
Hmm.
that fear of failure. So
Yes.
it's, on this project, um what is your biggest fear
Hmm.
about potentially, it might be something that can go wrong, something,
Yeah.
something that they personally are worried about. And that's where you often start. Sometimes people maybe are a little bit uneasy at first to really share, but the
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
times
Yeah.
you do that, the more you get out and you surface
Yes.
those deepest fears. So you're
Yeah.
almost facing failure head on. You're trying to kind
Exactly.
of say, what could go wrong for us?
Yeah.
Where are we
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
fail here? And what can we potentially then do to mitigate for that? Might not
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
work, but at least we're aware of what might happen here.
Yeah. Sounds almost similar to a premortem. I can't remember the name of
Yeah,
the game. Yes.
absolutely.
But
There's
yeah.
there's so many different
Ways.
words
Yeah.
for it,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
suppose when I link it to psychological safety, I'm like, right, what are you
Safety.
afraid of?
Let's talk about
And
that fear. Yes,
yeah, yeah.
exactly. I love it. I love it. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your best feels and what you took from it and what you learned and how you grew as well from it. So part of the conversation that we're going to have today as well is about women in leadership and what their experience of failure is like in leadership. So as we get into this, my first question to you is, based on your experience, based on what the research has said, what are some of the ways that gender influences how people experience failure?
Well, I suppose there's I think a good psychologist's answer
Yeah.
is kind of, it
It
depends.
depends.
It
Of
depends.
course. Of
Yes.
course.
Um, and again, there's so much there's so much kind of research on
Yes.
this subject, and I can speak from some of the research that I personally have undertaken, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
as part of my master's, but also, you know, some of the literature that I've
Yeah.
read around, and kind of general observations, my own you know, professional expertise and observations as well. And I think really what what lies underneath a lot of this is
Yeah.
very much those systemic um,
Hmm.
inequalities,
Yes.
and really that goes right through organizational processes,
Hmm.
um, and I think that's where, you know, I suppose that's where you kind of, that's where we probably start,
Sure.
um, and for me, a lot of the women that I have spoken to, um, and this was their perception, their lived experience, was they felt they had to be better, to
Hmm.
try harder,
Hmm.
um, to prove themselves before they got the opportunities in, you know, in leadership, um,
Yeah.
and whereas they felt that men were, say, given opportunities based on potential, not
Got it.
proven ability.
Yeah.
And that was kind of something that did strike me when they talked about their, I suppose, their experiences. And a lot of these women were C-suite that I had
Yes.
interviewed and researched. So their experiences was that it's not a level playing field, and I think we know
Yeah.
that anyway. We know um, that there are certain privileges that people have depending on their race, depending on their age, depending on their gender, that
Yes.
puts them a couple of steps ahead. And some of the women, and it's funny, I've been doing a little bit of research into networking and how
Yeah.
that in itself is a skill, and I'm even coming across some gender inequalities there, um,
Wow.
you know, because your networks provide those opportunities for you, and sometimes
Yes.
it's easier for, and again, I it sticks in my head, one of the women that I interviewed, about how it was easier for some of her male colleagues to network with other male colleagues, and for her to network, you know, with those male colleagues who obviously were very senior in the organization.
Yes.
Obviously, if you look at the structure of organizations and you look at the CSO data, like, I think when I did my research, it was like 72% of roles of C-suite positions were going to men,
Man. Yeah.
at that time. Um, so really, you get that almost. It's almost like this pyramid. You might
Hmm.
have men and women who are equal in the middle, and then as you go up the hierarchy, it's more likely to be men. So
Yeah.
I really think, certainly, some of the research that I've looked into, it talks about how inequities almost accumulate across
Right.
your
Yeah.
career life
Yeah.
cycle. And as I
Yeah.
said, that intersectionality then almost amplifies the disadvantage. And
Yes.
that, again, as I said, it's across hiring, across promotion, evaluation, leadership, and of course salary as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those systemic and inequalities, obviously they're almost like underpinning the
Yeah.
all of these things that are going on in the workplace, and also then perhaps perceptions of failure and when things go
Yes.
wrong,
Yeah.
for women. um, and there was this really interesting piece of research. I think it was, the researcher was Heilman,
Okay.
and I think it's Marguerite Heilman, and it's a recent enough paper. It was Women at Work, um, Pathways from Gender Stereotypes. It was about attributions of blame in team failures,
Yes.
and all
Yeah.
about how, um, when you had kind of similar failures across leaders, the I suppose women were more likely to be blamed, than men for those identical
Right.
team failures. So
Wow.
for
Yeah.
me, again, that that's kind of speaks for itself, really.
Yeah.
Again, that's one piece of research. There's lots of different types of research out there, but I think a lot of it does point to there are differences.
Yeah.
Some of them may not be, the effect may not be as large, but there's definitely differences when it comes to gender and failure. So, for example, women might be more likely to kind of internalize, and I suppose
Yes.
um what I say there is, like, they're more likely to ruminate
Right.
and
Mm-hmm.
kind of really blame themselves, be down on
Yes.
themselves if they do
Yeah.
something wrong,
Yeah.
and maybe replay that conversation again and again in
Over
their
and
head.
over. Yes.
Now, that trait is not solely exclusive to women. I know plenty of
Yes.
men that do a lot of
Who also
rumination as
ruminate?
well.
Yes.
But I think if you look, there's more likely to be like an externalization. And I suppose I don't want to stereotype either, but
Yes.
sometimes certain traits, or certain people might look for, it's almost like they set themselves up for, if this goes wrong, this is why. So it's like
Yes. It
those
is not me.
three.
It is, yes, it is all of these
Yeah,
other
yeah,
external
yeah. So
situations.
again, um and that all might come back to, say, attribution bias. So women might
Yes.
see it as something really personal,
Yeah.
whereas for men it's situational. So
Yeah.
men might find it easier to come back from that.
Yes.
And again, um, we're we're generalizing a little bit, because some
Yes.
men will absolutely experience the same as women,
Of
and
course.
vice versa.
Yeah.
But as I said, if you look at it generally, um,
Yeah.
women will definitely, I suppose, seen as internalizing the failure, men more externalizing it. So I suppose that same, so if men and women make the same stumble, right?
Yes.
The woman might be seen as clumsy, whereas the man might
Yes.
just be seen as, oh, that's unlucky. And
Yeah.
that that ultimately will change how people's careers will unfold then. And
For
that's why I kind of
sure.
said about how that systemic inequality that underpins all of the processes within organizations, um, has that impact as someone's career goes on as well.
Yeah. When you were talking, you talked about the fact that that women felt like they had to prove themselves. And then we came down a little bit further, and then we came to the research that says if they do the same thing, women are blamed a little bit more than their male counterparts. They're the ones that are blamed for that particular thing. And then we go around again, and then we have the women internalizing this, and it feels like that, like maybe that vicious circle of, you basically, as a woman, I'm internalizing it because you are looking at me, and the same person, we've done the same mistake. The only difference between us, particularly the main difference that I can see, is our gender. But you are saying to him that it's okay, well, to me it is my fault. So then I have to internalize that, and then it just goes on and on and on like that. Those types of those types of prophetic type of behaviors, where what I see from you also influences the way that I perceive myself, the way that I am then going to behave, whether or not I'm going to do something else after. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just that cycle again because of those systemic situations. But
Yeah.
that conversation too, about women being blamed, if you look at men and women on the same doing the same things, and women being blamed more often than men, kind of almost dovetails into the conversation about the glass cliff phenomenon, where when
Yeah.
it comes to organizations that are going through crises, or having a
Mm-hmm.
struggle, women tend to be the ones that are given a leadership opportunity at this point in time. And ultimately then, if the business failed, the business was already, it was already a risky situation. There are already many
Mhm.
things that was set up for that business to fail, but the women at this point in time are blamed significantly for the failure that occurs. What do you think this reveals about, how society perceives women and failure, and even anything more that you want to share about the glass cliff phenomenon?
Yeah, no, I think that I suppose that coined, I suppose, back in 2005 now, which is
Yeah.
crazy. Um,
Yes.
and what they found was that women were more likely to be placed in precarious leadership positions during crisis.
Yes.
So it it reveals that systemic and societal bias that women
Yeah.
are trusted in risky roles but not
Yes.
stable ones. So
Yes.
so for me, I'm like, what's that all about?
Yeah.
So we're tested in crisis but not rewarded with stability.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so it's not just, and it's kind of like they're we talk, you do hear this about breaking the glass ceiling, and so it's not necessarily about breaking the ceiling. They're almost handed the glass cliff, or
Yes.
perhaps what some might call a poison chalice. um
Yes.
so I think that um it it kind of speaks, it's almost like, are they being set up for failure?
Failure. Yeah.
um
Yeah.
because it's easier to give them the risky roles, the risky leadership roles during a time of crisis,
Yeah.
rather than kind of letting a male counterpart fail. But for me, it's almost like, why why are women not trusted in leadership positions during more stable times?
Yeah.
And I suppose that was the question that research kind of brought up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure we've come to any kind of, I suppose,
Answer.
conclusion about it.
Yeah.
But what I found, and for me, what was quite interesting was that when the women that I'd spoken to during my own research, a lot of them talked about their role models and the people that really trusted them and sponsored them and were almost in their corners.
Hmm.
um, and but also the fact that during their careers, so a lot of them were told, and again, we all go back to kind of early childhood, they were all kind of very much supporting families. You can be whatever you want
Yeah.
to be. There's no women's jobs, there's no men's jobs.
Yeah.
and and what I was looking at was the behaviors that they associated with, with good leadership.
Hmm.
And they talked about how, they had to be very persistent, but
Yes.
again, they were required to be empathetic, and a lot of
Hmm.
the traits that they admired in men, I suppose, would have been labeled as female traits.
Right.
And again, it's okay for the men to display those traits, but certainly one or two of the women did talk about how, that they were told that they were too aggressive
Right.
and they needed to
Yeah.
kind of calm down and not be
Yeah.
so aggressive or not be so pushy.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe um, it might be labeled differently. And that's what they felt. They felt that a male doing the exact same thing would have been labeled as, strong-willed or
Yeah.
persistent.
Yes.
Um, and that for me was, their observations were very much, if I try to emulate my male colleagues, I'm criticized. But if my male colleagues try to emulate some, I suppose, what's seen, and I don't like
Feminine,
that distinction
masculine
between
type of,
male
yeah,
and
traits.
female.
Yeah.
I think they're just
Just
all
behavior.
traits. There's no gender to them.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but I suppose they're more associated to women. Then they were almost praised.
Yes.
So men are praised for risk taking, and women are potentially then labelled reckless for doing the same
Yes.
thing. And I
Yeah.
think it a lot of it does come back to early experiences and how we're
Yeah.
shaping children, how we're kind
Mm.
of saying to boys, go get him, and and saying to girls, don't be so pushy, wait your turn, stand in line,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know be
Yeah.
polite. And we're saying to boys, stand up for yourself. All of those things we should be saying. We should be very careful in how we're almost responsible for some of those behaviors as they're growing up. So some of the women, again, that I spoke to were very conscious of the language that they used with their own children, um,
Yeah.
and even just the language that we see in books, and all of those things. So it was all about um, trying to to change the penalties for failure.
Yes.
So that again, risk taking is and risk taking again is something that you can measure in somebody in terms of their the trait. But depending on the role, risk taking should be positive, whether it's male or female. And a
Female.
female
Yeah.
who's taking risks shouldn't necessarily be seen as reckless. um,
Yeah.
and then I suppose, is it the case some of the research around those penalties for failure is that for some women it could be career ending,
Right.
and that they're judged more harshly
Yeah.
versus and especially maybe in more male dominated sectors as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, that that can really have an impact on, I suppose, on career trajectory for me.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
if people are experiencing those failures, say at mid management level, they're less likely to want to progress on to kind of
More senior
more senior
levels.
roles. Um,
Yeah.
and then that's not even bringing in again intersectionality,
Yes.
and all the other things that you can pile on that
Yeah.
that almost compound then the double standards, really, call
Yeah.
it what it
Yeah.
potentially is. So again, that persistence and re-engagement, men are encouraged, try again, unlucky,
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas women often step back because of reputational fear, to that reputational harm. And I do find it interesting, um, when you look at, say, perhaps women in politics and
Yeah.
how they are judged versus male
Yes.
counterparts. You look at, again, I look across various countries, and how some women are treated and judged in comparison to men. And you kind of say, if a woman did that,
Yes.
you know
It would
or
not have gone down as well. Yes. Yeah.
yeah. So you look at, again, I look at the UK system, the US system, and then some of the European systems as well. um and it just, it kind of, it almost expects people sometimes to be superhuman, I think, and
Yes.
they forget
Yeah.
that people are human, and that everybody is an individual regardless of their their gender, their race, their age, and all of those things need to be taken into consideration. But I think, unfortunately, gender is there is a big divide, and we continue to see that when it comes to pay. And certainly in Ireland here, there is a big move towards pay transparency. um,
Right.
so all of those things are um, are easy to identify through the data, through the bias and the inequality.
Yeah. So I mean, this has been very good, Christine, because you basically what you framed or what you've just kind of brought to our attention is this the impact of systemic biases and differences on the way that men and women experience failure and even how they rebound from failure, whether or not they persist and do something more, whether or not it kind of stalls them and stops them in their tracks. There's just so many different things that are that impact the way that, and this is general, like this is a very general statement. There's very many things that may impact the way that men and women experience failure. So my question to you is, given everything that we know about systemic biases, given everything we know about even potentially the differences in the way that men and women might internalize versus externalize, um, how they attribute failure, how would you redesign a workplace to respond to failure when it comes to the failure of males and female leaders, or just males and females generally within the organization? What would be your top three priorities for redesigning the workplace?
Okay, so um, again, kind of going back to my own field,
Yes.
I kind of
Yeah.
tend to start with with trust and
Yes.
psychological safety.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to normalize uh, learning from mistakes, and
Yeah.
not just learning from mistakes. And this is I suppose this kind of leads on to another point, is that we learn from those mistakes, but we really, and I've seen it in so many businesses, they're just so
Yeah.
busy. They finish one thing and they move straight on to the next
Yeah.
without embedding reflection practices.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, it's a no-brainer. It's
Yeah.
embedding not just post failure learning, but just like post project or post
Learn.
action.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what did we do really well there? What did we not do well? What do we need to change for next
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
That needs to be embedded into team routines.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what's going to help improve improve team performance,
Yeah.
and and also help us learn from not only our mistakes, but also learn from what could we do better.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as a psychologist, like, reflection is absolutely critical. It's something that we really need to be doing regularly,
Yeah.
um utilizing that reflection in order to ensure that we are, I suppose, um learning from
Yeah. Yeah.
from what we've done, that we're improving and continuously looking for ways to improve as well. So, final thing I think um, that really we probably don't see enough of is that leaders are expected to kind of to know it all.
Mm.
They're almost placed on this pedestal. They can do no
Yes.
wrong.
Yeah.
For me, leadership modeling is one of the single most important things within a business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's They are human, sharing
Yes.
their stories, sharing their own failures, sharing their own, I suppose, being that little bit more vulnerable
Human.
about what they're
Yes.
potentially worried about.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that for me is what we're often missing, is that human element to it, in that people are human, people are going to make mistakes, we're not going to get it right first time. And that's something that I'm working with a group at the moment, and it's a pretty big kind of change project, and we're
Mm.
really trying to drum that into them. Stop
Yeah.
expecting perfection. It
Yes.
just, it's like you're setting yourselves up for failure, and sometimes we almost need to, and I'm probably going into a fourth thing there, is interrupt
Right.
the thought patterns
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
currently in place. So if you know that someone, and again, it could be male or female, if you know that someone is a ruminator, you need to interrupt that rumination. If you know that someone has a tendency to almost set up excuses in
Mm-hmm.
advance,
Mm-hmm.
again, interrupt that thought process and challenge
Yeah.
them with
Yeah.
different things. But I suppose, again, you have to have had that, you need that psychological safety in order to have those good conversations with
Patience.
people. So
Yeah.
um so that's really important. Psychological safety for me is it's like the
Bedrock.
foundation. I think
Yeah.
without trust, without psychological safety, without good social capital with the people that you work with, you're not going to learn from your mistakes. You're not
Yeah.
going to reflect on things that have gone really well, as well. So it's not just about learning. Again, as I said, it's not just about learning from mistakes. Um, so, but doing those three or four things would be fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's almost like, um, are we really addressing what's happening beneath the surface? And that's where I kind of go back to the fact that inequalities persist across systems.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Women are
Yeah.
blamed disproportionately, and I suppose there are structural risks across the, um, or because of that glass cliff perception.
Yeah.
So that that's for me, that's like the $1 million question. And I know that there's so many amazing organizations looking at addressing the structural inequalities, and that's where organizations need to look at as well. We
Yeah.
really need to
Yeah.
look under the bonnet. um
Yes.
you know, are you creating true psychological safety, or are you just kind of saying, yes, we have psychological safety?
Safety.
um yeah, so
Yeah.
again, measure it, see where you're at,
Yeah.
and
And also,
look at your organizational practices.
yeah. 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 Because as you were talking about, have we do we have psychological safety? The thought that came to mind, and this is something that Amy Edmondson talks about, is that psychological safety is a team experience. It is not an individual experience. So if you've got members in your team who feel safe, great. But if there is that one person, female, parent, whatever, that potential attribute that they have that makes them feel that a little bit unsafe, then your team does not have psychological safety. And that, I
Yeah.
think, helps you to start to identify, well, if I've got a parent, if I've got a female, if I've got maybe a person who might be neurodiverse or may have a disability, that there is something specifically for them that is a problem, then that starts to point to maybe there are some systemic things that are in operation that are impacting a particular group more than it is impacting others. And it gives you
Yeah.
that space to start to look at that if you don't even know where to start. Because I know sometimes it may be hard to say, okay, so what are the systemic things that we need to change? If you've got, what are
Hmm.
the different groups within your organization? What might be that one thing that they might be experiencing, this group might be experiencing, that are different to others? That starts
Yeah.
the unpacking on, and take the
Yeah.
onion, the peeled off, so that you are able to see those things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just, it can be, and I've dealt with a lot of CEOs who, perhaps are like, what's the problem here? These people they're being too sensitive, or you get that, and they don't necessarily really consider. And again, this is maybe something I didn't consider when I talked about, the issue that I had, was those
Hmm.
unintended consequences
Yes. Yeah.
of particular processes or initiatives, or anything that they're putting in place in their organization. And they may be doing it with the best intentions, but
Yeah.
they fail to kind of, and it's really hard to do. It
Yeah.
is
It is.
really,
It
it is not
is.
easy. And that's why I'm kind of saying, it's like, I don't have all the answers. But I think yes, there are some kind of foundational things that you can do, but it's very much like, like organizational employee well-being. It's
Yeah.
like you can throw all the resources at, well-being weeks, and um, having people come in to give really kind of powerful talks, but unless you actually address the root cause, it's a
Unless
bit
you
of a
provide
waste
them.
of waste of time.
Exactly. If they are under resource and all you're doing is giving them talks, they're still under resourced. They're still gonna be stressed.
Yes, exactly. My little phrase is, you're putting a stick and plaster on a bullet wound. So
Exactly. Exactly.
the Northern Irish coming out again. But yeah, no. So for me, and I think that's always, I suppose, what what we try to do when it comes from from an occupational psychology perspective is we're trying to understand the root cause
Yeah.
of the issues that an organization is facing.
Yeah.
And again, quite a lot of the time I am dealing with organizations where there is a blame culture, and
Yes.
so that fear of speaking up,
Yeah.
um and that certainly goes across that goes across genders.
Yeah.
So that's something you have to understand and get to the core of it. You don't just go in and start, right, let's create
Oh,
psychological safety.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
an understanding as to what is actually causing these problems. So regardless of what it is, I suppose for me it's seek first to understand
Yes.
what the actual issue is before jumping into what's gonna resolve it. And I
Yeah.
suppose until we get to the bottom of that, until we can, for me, answer that, what I feel is like a monumental question around inequality across
Yeah. Yeah.
society. It's like, are we really going to be able to address the
Some of
perceptions of
the,
failure?
yeah. One of the things that my husband always, would always ask me, especially when I was talking to him about initiatives that I wanted to do at work and projects that I'm really passionate about, and the way that I would like to see the culture shift. He was like, Allison, so bottom line, if you're working in an organization, say where only 20% of your staff are females, why would a company invest time? Because a lot of it might be time, energy, and other types of resources into trying to make systemic changes when that's only 20% of their organization. For a
Mm-hmm.
leader who might be struggling to answer a question like that, do you have a response for to them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think it's almost a little bit short-sighted to look at
Yeah.
the now. And again, I've worked with there was one thing that I did, and it was something I did in my own time, with some other very senior women,
Mm-hmm.
in the engineering sphere. And
Yeah.
again, you want to kind of make change that's going to potentially impact the future, because that's what we need to be kind of looking at. Because so often I kind of think, and again, it kind of comes back to the research I did in my master's. It kind of starts when people are children,
Yeah.
and for me, that's where kind of we should be focusing
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the initiatives that I've introduced within some organizations, they kind of say, oh, we're too small for this, or but I knew that they had ambitious plans for growth.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not about addressing noise needs, it's about getting you future ready.
Right.
So
Yes.
I think, again, you have to kind of answer the what is the issue that the business is facing,
Mm-hmm.
what are the potential issues they may come across as they grow,
Yeah.
or as we, um and again, you look at the demographics in society, and all of those things. But one of the things that I did, as I said, in my own time, was that we went into a girls' school,
Yeah.
and I brought this group of very impressive female engineers,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
talked about their career journeys. And I've done it a couple of times across a couple of different industries, maybe
Yeah.
the financial services and everything.
Yeah.
um, and what for me is fascinating, and we often kind of look at careers as this linear
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Yeah.
And what I
Yeah.
find, certainly with a lot of the women, is that there was no straight line to
Yeah.
achieving and to
Yeah.
getting where they wanted to go, because sometimes life gets in the way. And
Of
especially,
course.
if you're if you're a mother, and you have children and things like that, and so life can get in the way sometimes of
Yeah.
your career trajectory. Like myself, I was able to go back into education,
Yeah.
um after I'd had children. So that was one thing that we really impressed on these girls,
Yeah.
was that, if you see it, you can be it.
Yes.
Um, So we wanted to give them, female role models and talk about
Mhm.
our own role models, talk about who inspired us, and we wanted to know who inspired them.
Yeah.
A lot of it was like their family members, and that's, again, you talked about your
Right.
dad, I talked about my dad,
Yes.
and,
Yeah.
so we need to get the message to children when they're early, and that's why there's
Yeah.
so many things around STEM, getting into to kind of, especially girls' schools,
Yeah.
and we are kind of seeing more and more. Like when I'm looking out at, I think last week I was in a room with about, there was over 100 engineers, and there were a lot of female faces. So
Yes.
that was great to
Yeah.
kind of see. Um, so that's where we kind of need to address. So I think if somebody is questioning an initiative, well, one, you need to make sure there is a business case for it, but also how will it help them in the future,
Yeah.
as well
Yeah.
as helping them now. So that's often how I've looked at it. But for me, um, it starts a lot sooner. I think by the time people get into the workplace,
Yeah.
it might be a little bit too late.
That is so true. I think even by the time you get into the workplace, so much is already set for you,
Yeah.
for how you experience things as well. So I do love the whole idea of, and even like how you're doing with your sons, working from the time they're children, impressing upon them the need to work hard, impressing all these different things about equality. You talked about equality.
Yeah.
We're all equal very early on in the conversation. And I think it's
Yeah.
those types of conversations that is so important for us to have with our children, because then that's where we're gonna start to see change as they enter the workforce and start to
Mhm.
demand, require, and start to behave differently as well to generations who were there before them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what for me is really interesting is obviously we know, again, that careers are not linear and there are no longer jobs for life. So
Yeah.
many times I've seen people be qualified in a career. So I met this very impressive, female senior leader, and she started out life as a physiotherapist and
Oh
then
wow.
decided this
Yeah.
isn't actually the career for me, and then
Yes.
retrained to be an accountant. So
Yes.
it's kind of like saying, just because you train as one thing and you do one thing for maybe 10 years of your life or something, doesn't mean you can't change, doesn't mean you
Exactly.
can't kind of pivot. So
Yes.
that for me was an important message for the girls that we spoke to as well, to kind of say, if you try something and you don't like it, that's okay.
Yeah.
Um,
There's time and
do
space for you to make a change. Yeah.
There's so much time, and that's just because you
Yes.
do a degree in something. I met somebody recently who was a zoologist. That was their
Yeah.
training from university, and
Right.
what they ended up doing in their career was just a million miles away from
Oh
that.
wait.
But so yeah, so it's not, as I kind of said, when maybe things don't go to plan, it's not about, it's all about how you respond to it, and how
Yes.
you utilize and pivot
Yes.
from that onto, right, what's next, rather
Yeah.
than ruminating or being, beating yourself up about it or saying it's not my fault. um so
Yeah.
I think we need to almost interrupt those mindsets,
Yeah.
whether or not it is, um it is that, oh, this is all my fault, or why did I do this. We almost need to have those little tools as to what's going to help. And one of my colleagues, I work with a guy called Jay Chopra, and I love this, this little model that he teaches people. And it's just, when you're ruminating, he's
Yeah.
just like, right, see a big stop sign in your head,
Yeah.
and then maybe observe what's, take a breath.
Yeah.
Okay. um, Observe what's going on around you, or and then, proceed with something a little bit more useful than rumination. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
the stop, big stop sign, take a breath, observe
Yeah.
what's going on around you, and proceed with something more proactive, or
Right. Yeah.
productive. And I suppose I kind of did that when I was thinking, I can't do this, I can't do this. It was when I was pursuing the education, I suppose, in my more recently,
Yeah.
and somebody kind of made me sit back and actually take a look at just look at what you have achieved to this
Yeah.
point.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
give yourself a break. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think again, we fail to reflect. So
Reflection bid, yeah. And embed reflection. Not it's because it's not just a personal thing. We just don't reflect personally. But when you bring a team together to reflect collectively, you are benefiting from like diverse insights,
yeah,
experiences, perspectives that
hmm,
gives the reflection so much more of a flavor, a much rounder
yeah,
picture. You benefit so much more from that. So I enjoy that second point that you talked about. You know, when you were giving your priorities, you've got to, embrace learning as a thing, but you've got to embed reflection as a practice
yeah,
after you, and not just for
yeah.
failures, but just across
For
the different projects.
everything.
So yes, exactly. For everything, embed
Hmm,
that reflection, a reflection process.
hmm.
Love it.
Yeah, it's something that actually is really nice to do with teams.
Yes.
So with one group, I split them up into to three groups, and I
Hmm.
asked them, I gave them a chart. It had just like a road on it, and I asked them to map their last 12 months. What were
Hmm.
their greatest challenges, things that stood out for them in the last year, and it
Hmm.
was so fascinating the different things that were pulled out across those three groups, and they
Wow.
just said, God, it's actually amazing to see what we've achieved in the
Yes.
last year. So that kind of talks to
Yes.
that point and as to how it can be really powerful to do in teams.
Teams, exactly, exactly. I love working with teams. I love working with groups of people. I think I have a bias to it because personally, one of the
Yeah.
things that I've learned about myself is that I work better in a team environment. So, to put a caveat around that, when it comes to brainstorming, I love working with teams. If then you've got to do something, let me get ahead and do it. But there's also an energy and there is something that's very potent when you are in a community and you're all striving together towards a goal, and everybody is working full strength, all of their putting all of their energies and so forth behind it. So
Mm-hmm.
I am a team person. I did not know this about myself for a long time, and then when I recognized, especially when I got into entrepreneurship and I was struggling so much, one of the things that came to mind was, but Alison, you do so much better when there are other people around you whose energy you're feeding off of, who who
Mm-hmm.
who you're walking and soaring with as well. And this is the reason why.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my Christine, it has been such a privilege and a pleasure to have this conversation with you and for you to kind of distill some of the your own personal research that you've done and those insights that you've gained, and also the experiences that you would have had in your 20 plus years doing consulting and working with teams, working with leaders and so forth. Thank you so much for sharing that on the Best Bills
Oh,
podcast and with
it's
our
been,
audience.
oh, sorry. It's been brilliant speaking to you, Alison. It's lovely to chat and to try and maybe, I suppose, consider some of those big questions that we may
Yes.
not, as I said, may not have the answers to, but
Yeah.
I think it's good to be aware of them.
Exactly. And to also, I think, consider, because I think for some, well, for anybody going through failure, sometimes failure can feel like a very personal and individual type of experience. So I think it is always good for people, who are experiencing a failure specifically, because this is my thing, to just hear these stories and to hear, oh, this is not just you. You're not the only person who's experiencing this. This is
Yeah.
actually something that is experienced by many. And in fact, it really is not just you, but there are actually systems in place that sometimes put you at a disadvantage
Mhm.
because of whatever your experience might be, whether or not it is gender, as we were talking about today. But we also talked about those other things: neurodiversity, parenthood, disabilities, etc. So yes. So thank you so very much.
No problem. Lovely to speak to you.
Heartfelt thank you to Christine for bringing such clarity, nuance, and empathy to this conversation. If you'd like to connect with her, you'll find all the details in our show notes. If Best Feels resonates with you, the best way to support us is to share it. Send it to a friend, leave a review on your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube at Best Feels Podcast. Do you have a story of your own? We'd love to hear it. Email us at info@mybestfails.com and let's keep building this brave archive of our best fails. And if you're currently navigating a failure, personal, professional, or somewhere in between, and want a space to reflect and explore what it means for you, head to the show notes to book a discovery call with me. Failure is a community resource. Don't hoard yours. Share it. You never know who it might help or what it might heal. Until next time.